The world of human civilization and cultural creation covers a whole bunch of different areas, and if we get down to it, the cool stuff happening in each area is all thanks to some seriously smart folks. So, there's genius in every field, but when we stack up the art world against science, philosophy, and other subjects, what's the big deal about art? Well, it's basically the land of the geniuses. Take a look at any art history, whether it's about painting, music, Chinese or Western art, literature, sculpture, or architecture, and you'll see that each stage of art's development is all about these super talented artists making their mark. For instance, in the music scene, modern Western tunes kicked off with Bach, the dude behind Baroque music. Without him, there would be no Baroque jams. And why did Baroque music later turn into classical music? It's all thanks to three big shots: Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven. Without these musical geniuses, there would be no classical music era. The other musicians around at the same time as these three were basically following their lead, while these three were setting the rules and shaping the style of the time. What do we call these guys? Artistic geniuses, no doubt about it. Art is definitely the land of the geniuses. This whole thing has got the art folks and the big thinkers like Kant in Critique of Judgment all riled up, talking about the concept of genius. It's mind-blowing. Genius is mind-blowing. It takes some serious training to grow into one, no exceptions, none at all. But let's be real, the gap between rigorous training and just plain hard work is massive. It's just not fair. Who comes to mind? Mozart. When Mozart wrote his first piece at 5, I'm over here studying music too, how many years would it take me to do that? He was just 5, what can you do? He wrote 3 operas by the time he was 10. Is this all down to rigorous training? You bet. So, I've had my fair share of rigorous training too. And what about diligent study? Mozart said, "The effort I put into composing is unmatched by anyone." So, he was pretty diligent, right? Then we say diligence creates genius, but that's not quite right. Don't buy into that. Diligence may help you to become a genius, that's all. How can diligence create genius? I think I'm pretty diligent, but I'm still studying Marx. I've been chowing down on Marx's ideas my whole life, right? It's just the way it is, but genius is not achieved only through diligence, right? It's a whole different ball game, don't mix these two up. For someone to become a genius, they've got to be diligent. It's not something they actively choose, it's all about their passion and interest. It's not about their strong will, it's just because they love it so much, right? Without it, they'd be like zombies, right? So, they might seem diligent, but really, they're just wired to be diligent, not choosing to be. Got it? A genius has to be diligent, diligence can't create genius. Both of these statements are totally on point when you put them together. So, let's get talking about genius. What does it mean to be an artistic genius? Why do we call these folks geniuses? Remember when we talked about art and truth? Art is where truth first pops up. When a piece of art is created, truth happens, right? So, a real artist is like the OG truth seeker, the original one, they're a part of the original occurrence. Art is the OG truth seeker, in pursuit of truth, as Heidegger put it. There are 4 areas. The pursuit of truth is in these 4 areas: art, religion, philosophy, and politics. Hey! Politics could be an area of truth, but not anymore, because politics is all about the fate of a nation, right? It's how a nation's fate is played out and made real. Building a nation is the pursuit of truth, but now it's all about politicians. The era of true statesmen is over, and politics is finally not a realm of truth anymore, right? That's the deal. So, the realms of religion, philosophy, and art are now the realms of truth. The real deal artist, the artistic genius, is like the ultimate vibe catcher of the times. They're tuned into the pulse of the era, and even the fate of humanity. These folks are super sensitive, like Rousseau, the French philosopher who wrote Discourse on the Origin and Basis of Inequality Among Men. Hume once said that after chatting with Rousseau, he thought of him as a person with no skin. You know, we all have regular skin, right? When a light breeze and some drizzle come our way, we barely feel a thing, right? But imagine someone with no skin, how would they feel? Every little breeze and drizzle would make their whole body ache. That's how sensitive Rousseau was, like he had no skin. And then there's another skinless wonder in the spiritual sense, Nietzsche. He basically predicted the future suffering and disasters that Europe would go through. He used his ideas to foresee all this pain and suffering. That's why people only really got what Nietzsche was saying after the 2 world wars. It took those disasters for Europeans to truly understand Nietzsche's message. Nietzsche was the one who first said that God is dead, and we humans are left without a home. These are all super deep and sensitive ideas, like having no skin. So, artistic geniuses aren't gods, but they're pretty darn close, and definitely have that godlike sensitivity. Back in the old days, even in primitive society, there were already some real geniuses. The folks who were dabbling in magic and creating stuff, they were like the original artists, even though they didn't have that fancy title. These guys were like the ones who could really tune in to the raw truths of life. From way back when to now, throughout history, how many artistic geniuses have popped up? They really get the whole connection between the big picture and us regular folks. They use their creations to bring people together and lift everyone's spirits. They're not afraid to lay bare the real deal about life in their work. They pour their deepest emotions into what they make, blowing everyone's minds, and then we all realize the kind of world we're living in. So, the most genuine emotions of humanity are laid bare for all to see through the work of artistic geniuses. So, we're wondering, how come these artistic geniuses can pull off such amazing stuff? It's because they're like these antennas tuned into the vibe of the times. They're all about capturing the spirit of the era, the fate of the times. To really tap into the destiny of a nation or even all of humanity, they gotta have 2 things going on at once. Now, let's get into what makes these artistic geniuses tick. First off, what sets their emotions apart from us regular folks? They're just like us, living in the real world, feeling all the same highs and lows, chasing after goals, dealing with worries and hopes. But here's the kicker, when they're feeling all these emotions, there's this extra layer to it. Their everyday feelings are mixed with this deep sense of something bigger, something beyond. What's this beyond all about, you ask? It's like love, the kind that lasts forever, the call of destiny, the voice of conscience. It's all about going beyond what's right in front of us. Our daily grind is all about dealing with specific stuff, and our emotions come and go with the ups and downs. But for these artistic geniuses, when they're feeling it, they're also seeing past the immediate cause of those feelings. They're tapping into some real truths about human life and getting a sense of the destiny that we're all a part of. Why did Wang Guowei, died 1927, think Li Yu's, 10th century CE, poetry was so great? Well, after Li Yu's kingdom went down the drain, a lot of his poems were all about his life as a fallen ruler. You can bet on that. When you're in the shoes of a fallen ruler, you've got to let out the emotions of being a captive, right? But if he just wrote about his pain and sorrow in a plain old way, those poems wouldn't have meant as much. So, when we read Li Yu's poems, we're not just feeling the pain of a fallen ruler, which has nothing to do with us, right? I mean, we're not exactly in the fallen ruler business. But what we're reading isn't just about a fallen ruler's feelings, it's about something that's gotta be part of our own lives and emotions. That's why these poems hit home with us. Alone, leaning on the railing, with streams and hills as far as the eye can see, parting is easy, but meeting again is tough. The flowing water, the falling flowers, spring comes and goes, between heaven and earth. He went beyond just feeling the pain of a fallen ruler. He figured out fate, realized there's some kind of bigger existence that no one in the world can escape. The longing in life is as long as the eastward flowing river. That's some deep stuff. So when Wang Guowei said that Li Yu's poetry was the real deal, he was seeing the big picture. What's it mean to see the big picture? It means that in his own struggle to survive, he understood there's something bigger out there, and that understanding was mixed up with his own emotions. Us regular folks, even though we're not artists, can still connect with some deep emotions and a sense of something bigger than ourselves. People like that tend to feel things pretty deeply, which might come off as being overly sensitive to others. Little things in life can really get to them. And hey, our past is in the rear-view mirror, right? Yeah, it can stir up some uncomfortable feelings, can't it? So, for an artist, being sensitive and kind of melancholic is a must. They're not all caught up in the everyday grind, and their emotions aren't tied to practical stuff. They rise above it. They can understand and feel the pain, distress, and disasters of others, even if they haven't been through it themselves. Sometimes, they can even understand it better than the people who've actually been through it. That's why great writers can create such a wide range of characters in their stories. They couldn't have lived every single experience, after all. Tolstoy wrote about a prostitute, and he did it so vividly. A real-life prostitute reading his work might be moved to tears, thinking, how does Tolstoy know exactly how I feel? Did he become a prostitute himself? But that's just not possible. For some people, big events in life, or even the little things, can really hit them deep. So, are these folks not sensitive and kind of melancholic? Among us regular folks who aren't artists, there are definitely some who show these traits all the time. But they haven't become artists. Why? Because they're missing something else. Like I said before, it's about having both things at the same time. So, what's the second condition? It's all about bringing together your skills in putting things together based on your ability to think up new and creative stuff. You might be a real whiz at coming up with cool ideas, but not so hot at putting them into a well-crafted piece. On the flip side, you might be a master at putting things together, but struggle to come up with fresh and imaginative ideas. For a true artistic genius, it's about blending these two things seamlessly. They're able to take their knack for putting things together and use it to bring their creative ideas to life. Some folks might be really skilled craftsmen in a particular field, but at the end of the day, they're just that, craftsmen. They're held back by the limits of all the skills they've picked up, and they can't break free from those constraints. But artists are different. All the skills they've learned for putting things together are just tools, things they use to bring their creative ideas to life. Ever seen a piece of work that just screams, crafted, when you look at it? That's because it's lacking in creative imagination, and you can see all the marks of chiseling and carving. So, what makes a great work of art? What's it like? It feels like it all just naturally fits together, like it's the most natural thing in the world. If you can't see any signs of technique, then it's a win. But if the technique is all too visible, then it's a fail. So, how do artists pull this off? It's because they can use their skills in putting things together under the control of their imagination. A lot of people who try their hand at writing start off by churning out poetry or prose that's just dripping with craftsmanship. It's like they've learned a bunch of ways to express themselves, and then they just throw them all in there. Some people write in a really old-fashioned way, but they're lacking in imagination. Others are big fans of classical poetry and have memorized tons of it. You know, like the saying goes, diligently recite the 300 Tang poems, and you will make poetry, but what do they come up with when they write? Nothing new or creative. So, some people end up just piecing together bits and bobs of verses. They've read a lot, so they can gather up the poems of their predecessors and turn them into something new. Sure, there are some really successful compilers out there, who manage to inject a bit of creative imagination into the words of those who came before, but it's always limited. Alright, so we've covered the two key things you need to be an artistic genius. And guess what? These are traits that regular folks like us can totally have. Take, for instance, being the kind of person who's all sensitive and gets moved by the little things in life. You know, the type who's always feeling things deeply. Then there are others who are super logical and sharp, but kind of lacking in the emotional department. They see everything in a practical way, right? Dealing with these folks can be a bit of a challenge, as they're not afraid to speak their minds and can come off as a bit off-putting. When we chat, it's always about logic and practical stuff, right? We never really talk about things that go beyond that. But wouldn't it be great if you could share something that really tugs at the heartstrings? Let's talk about things that we can connect with emotionally, wouldn't that be awesome? That's why people should read books. I mean, I'm talking about diving into literature. If people don't read, what happens? Their language becomes bland, and they become kind of unappealing. But when you read a bunch of literary works, your whole outlook on life changes, doesn't it? It's not just about logic and practicality. In life, there are two types of people, right? And for the second type, they really need to step up their game. They shouldn't forget about the world of art. They shouldn't be like this one European math whiz who, after reading a long poem, said, "What was the point of all those words? He didn't prove anything. Why write so much?" So, we need to feed our souls, right? Then we won't be stuck in the same old boring routine, set in concrete with no breathing room, right? In everyday life, among regular folks, there are some who can really be moved. They can see beyond logic, beyond gains and losses, and understand so much about life. But why can't they become artists? It's because they don't have the second condition at the same time, right? That's the combo of being able to put things together and having a wild imagination. Some people have the second condition, but their emotions don't include an understanding of something bigger than life. We might have one of these conditions, but if we have both at the same time, what are we? Artistic geniuses. An artistic genius is the perfect mix of these two conditions. It's about having both at the same time. Alright, let's take a breather.